We spoke about the potency of the neshama, that when it comes to a state of an isayin, a test, a trial associated with the faith in Hashem Echad, the oneness of Hashem, so it wakes up and it stands in full expression. It stands in full manifestation. As he brings different psukim which demonstrate this idea, to the extent that even Harim Kadei Nagamasu, mountains, things which seem to be intimidating, melt away in the face of this godly energy which exists within the neshama when it comes to this test of Achdus Hashem. In other words, Chas v'Shalom, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem. So here the Alter Rebbe goes on and says, to what degree does this Chochmah of the Nefesh have the ability to express itself? In other words, it's able to melt away mountains, but to what degree does it go? In other words, to what extent does it have the ability, or does it actually express itself when it is presented with this trial of Chas v'Shalom, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem? So we actually alluded to, we said a few words of this conclusion of this Perek in the end of last week's class. But what Alter Rebbe is saying over here, as it's this week's lesson, that apparently one would say, okay, the neshama woke up and it stands in its full expression, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem. But not to renounce the oneness of Hashem, maybe not to the extent that it would prevent itself doing something so external, like bowing down to an idol, for example. You know, there's the neshama. Would the neshama go that far that even not allow itself to do something seems to be something so trivial, like bowing down to an idol? If you tell the neshama, now I want you to completely stand up in front of so many people, or truly believe in idolatry and this idol, in other words, renounce the Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, then the neshama, that is the expression of the neshama. In other words, the vayikatz, the awakening, the arousing of the neshama from its state of sleep and slumber, to say, no, I am going to give up my life, chas v'shalom, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem. That's fine. In other words, I am truly going to believe or continue or demonstrate my belief in Achdus Hashem and the oneness of Hashem. But perhaps one would suggest, and maybe one would say, that when it comes to a very external expression of this, external expression of renouncing the oneness of Hashem, perhaps the neshama would say, no, you know what, deep down I believe in Hashem Echad. They want me just for a few moments to prostrate myself in front of the idol, I'll go ahead. Which means the vayikatz, the neshama coming to a full state of expression, means to say it's in belief, in its belief in Hashem Echad. But who says that it would go so far in not prostrating, bowing down for a second to an idol? Or, for example, to do something so trivial, let's call it, to say, to verbalize the words, and kind of making even a kind of whispering to Hashem a few moments before and saying, God, you know, what I'm going to say for those few seconds, please cancel it out. I'm just going to say something which is going to intimate or indicate the renouncing the oneness of Hashem. But deep down, Hashem, you know, my heart is fully intact with you and with your oneness, and I plan to live the rest of my life based on my strong belief in Hashem Echad. But for a few seconds I'm going to renounce, because they're asking me, they're telling me, you know, if you're going to renounce this verbally, we'll let you live. So because I want to live with my family and can live out my life, and again, live out my life with a belief in you, not necessarily dealing with someone who's committing himself to be observant or scrupulously observant in Hashem in Torah mitzvahs, because we said here we're dealing with a Rasha or a Peshay Yisrael. But he's telling the Eivishter that they're testing me now. So I woke up, my heart is up, my Chochmah Shebenefesh is up and is in function. I see you, I want you, and I don't want anything else other than you. But give me a few seconds just to spare my life. I'm just going to say this in the most external fashion of expression. Just to say, there is no God. That's it, and then I'm with you again. And the same thing, again, that's an external expression of speech or just an external expression of action. I'm going to bow down. How long does it take to bow down? 5 seconds. And then again, God, I'm with you. And I love you, and I'm so connected to you. And my Chachma Shebenefesh right now is fully intact and fully in its full capacity or its full spirit in connection, in a profound connection with you, Hashem. And I feel the test, I feel the trial, and I'm really telling myself, no, there's only one Hashem, and ultimately I'm going to live with this emunah, not necessarily I'm going to be the Fruma Yid, because ultimately we're dealing with a Rosh and a Peshay Yisrael, but I really, my Chachma Shebenefesh is really aroused now, and really in complete and full expression, to the exclusion of those few seconds that I'm going to bow down into this idol, which they're asking me to bow down, just to spare my life, to continue with my family and live a life of Achdus Hashem. So apparently it seems okay, but ultimately it's limiting the expression of that neshama of the Chachma Shebenefesh. In other words, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is over here, if you want to know to what degree, or you want to know how strong the Chachma Shebenefesh, the essential connection of the Yid with the Eibishter is, that it'll come to such an expression that it would not even allow itself for a moment in time, and in the most external fashion. Deep down I believe, but I'm just going to say it for a few seconds. Speech in general is an expression, eternal expression. Or expression rather of an external, that's what speech is all about. I could think one way and it could speak another way. Because speech by definition is something, that's the mile of Samanecha B'Peh, that's B'Peh B'Lev, you're in your heart and your speech. Your speech is aligned with what goes on in your heart. When speech is aligned with what goes on in your thought, that's a mila, that's a virtue that a person could keep his speech, thought and speech aligned with each other. And why is it a virtue? Why is it an advantage? Why is it a mila? Because speech, not necessarily does it always give out what goes on in a person's thought. Because thought is an internal lavush, internal garment, while speech is an external garment. So the Alter Rebbe is pointing out over here that the neshama, the expression of the Chachma Shebenefesh, when it comes to his test and a trial and Hashem Echad, doesn't only wake up and it says in its mind and in its heart, Hashem, I'm with you. It goes to such a degree that it will not even allow itself or even to express itself externally, and even in front of it, even for a few seconds, in the renouncing of Hashem Echad, of the oneness of Hashem. To the extent that they tell this person, who is again even a Rosh and a Peshay Yisrael, the days in the context of his overall conduct, if you're going to say the words, there is no God, you're going to renounce the oneness of Hashem, we are going to let you live. If you're going to take those, if you're going to continue and be persistent and announce and proclaim the oneness of Hashem, we're going to kill you. The moment the neshama comes to such a state, and to such a test, to such a trial, it is ready to go as far as allowing itself to die, to completely expire, not even to take those few seconds and express the renouncement of Hashem, even in the most external way of expression, in speech. And more than that, not only in speech, which again, speech in comparison to action is also more internal. Action is totally external. Like even an animal can move a table, a man can move a table, an animal can't speak. Right? Because speech, in the end of the day, is a symbol of the wisdom of man, or the superiority of man over all of creation. So speech, in comparison to thought, is also external. And the Yid's neshama won't allow himself, chas v'sholom, to verbally renounce the oneness of Hashem. Action is even more external than that. So one would say, okay, in speech he's ready to expire for not to renounce the oneness of Hashem, but in action, to bow down for a few seconds, kind of just to bend his back to an idol, the Chachma Shebenefesh doesn't go so far to allow itself to die, literally to expire, not to bow down. The answer is no. That the koyach of this Chachma Shebenefesh goes as far as even taking a few seconds. Rather to expire than take the few seconds and do something so external and seemingly so trivial to bow down to this idol. That's what we've seen in the history of Am Yisrael, by the hundreds of thousands. That when the Chachma Shebenefesh, and again, not necessarily by the pious, not necessarily by the scholarly, it was a simple people, and even Chaitim and Shishayim and Peshay Yisrael, means on their daily conduct, They were not particularly aligned with Ratzon Hashem. When it came to the test and trial of Emunas Hashem, the faith of Hashem, their faith, in other words, the expression, the Chachma Shenefesh completely woke up, Ayikatz Ki Yashin Hashem, and it was ready to express itself not only with its feelings, with its thought, but more than that, even with its action, and even more than that, even with its even with its speech, and even more than that. In other words, the speech should be aligned with Hashem Echad, and was ready to expire, not even to verbally utter the words of the renouncement of renouncing the oneness of Hashem, but even more than that, even total external expression of action, physically bowing down to an idol. The Yid went as far to allow himself to expire, even not to take the few seconds to express himself in the most external fashion possible, saying to himself, I truly believe in Hashem Echad, my heart is there, my mind is there, but just a few seconds to bow down, even that, for that he was ready to expire. Because that is the potency of the neshama, the strength of the neshama, that when you say Vayikatz, it gets up, and it comes into full expression and manifestation. It has no limit. It goes as far as the alignment, and it was staying aligned with Hashem in all of its faculties and all of its manners of expression. This is the end of this Perek. And it was last week we spoke about the general idea of the neshama waking up, the general idea of the neshama allowing itself to pierce, or nothing would be able to stand in the way of the energy of the essence of the neshama. Even like we said, even mountains will melt in the face of the energy of the neshama when it comes to a nisayin bidvar emunas Hashem, associated with the faith of Hashem, in faith in Hashem. But today we begin to what degree. Today's lesson is to what degree is the neshama ready to go. To what degree does the neshama express it? To what level the neshama is the expression and the manifestation of this chachma shebenefesh? To what level does it go? So he says, this godly energy which you find is expressed or is invested in the chachma shebenefesh, its strength and energy is so great, it's so strong, it's so potent, to the extent to chase away and to push away the impure forces, vaklipis. And again, an expression of the tumen sitracha, which is the impure forces, shalayuchlu, that they can't even yigu, even touch, and have an effect, afilu belavushav, even in his garments, which is machshava, dibur, u'maisa shalamuna, emunas Hashem Echad, which is thought, which is speech, which is action associated with the faith in the oneness of Hashem. To that degree, Dahainu, the Rebbe explains, Lamed bin Yisai, a person is ready to stand in this test, in this trial. Limser nafshay, to give up his life, which means to completely expire. Afilu shlei lases, not even to do even a action neged emunas Hashem Echad, against the faith in the oneness of Hashem. Kigoin, for example, to do something so simple, to do something so external, to express himself in such an external manner. Just to bow down to an idol. Even he doesn't believe it at all in his heart, but he's ready to expire and to give up his life, even not to do something so external, like, and again, the expression of action, the external dimension of, or the external, the demonstration, the way it expresses itself in the most external manner in association with action. Even there, the nefesh alikis is not ready, or is ready to expire, chas v'shalom, not to express himself, even the maisa. V'chein, similarly, ledaber toyeh chas v'shalom malachtas Hashem, not to speak against the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to speak falsely concerning the unity of Hashem, which means even even that his heart, his mouth and his heart are not aligned. His heart is complete with the faith of Hashem, and nonetheless he still is ready to expire, not to chas v'shalom, even like we said before, like we explained before, not to verbally utter any type of word which would chas v'shalom be translated that he's renouncing the oneness of Hashem, even though in his heart he believes it, he deeply believes. That's how strong, or to that degree, the chachma shebenefesh, which again, the Ein Sof, the godly energy which exists in the chachma shebenefesh, is ready to go. This is called the fear which is included in the love. What does it mean, the fear including the love? Because we said before that what is the shadish, what is the source of this determination of the neshama, of the chachma shebenefesh? That's the ava mesuteres. That is the hidden and innate love. As we said before, this is comes b'Yerusha, comes an inheritance from Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. That every yid has this ava, every yid has this love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The only thing is, it's called mesuteres. It's hidden because it's hidden, unfortunately, in the levush sak, and the garments and the layers of impurity which the person brought upon himself as based on his overall conduct as a non-observant yid, or someone who's not 100% aligned, or generally is not aligned with Ratzon Hashem, and therefore he created these different layers of impurity which cover over this ava, over this love. And therefore this love doesn't usually stand in a state of expression and manifestation. That's why it's called ava mesuteres. It's hidden. But the whole time we're talking about love and love and love. In other words, this is the ava which came from Avraham Avinu and from the Avos and so on. And all of a sudden you're dealing with a fear not to deny the one, not to renounce the oneness of Hashem. Where does fear come in here? So the Alter Rebbe says that it goes together. Because he has such a love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the love is so powerful and potent, therefore he fears not to do anything which is going to go against, or is not going to be aligned with his ava, with his love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the bar tchilu, because here you're dealing with fear. I will not chas v'shalom utter the words, or utter any word which is not aligned with Achdus Hashem, with renouncing the oneness of Hashem. So apparently that's associated with fear. I will not bow down to this Avodah Zarah, to this idol, even b'maisa, even for a few seconds, and again I won't bow down even expressing myself externally. Actually, in action. So apparently the notion, or what we're hearing over here, is someone has fear of Hashem and ready to expire, and chas v'shalom not to do anything associated with it, which is contradicting emunas Hashem and believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But how does this work with? Aren't we dealing with love, affection? The Alter Rebbe says, true, this is the fear which is included in this love. Because you have because he has this innate natural love, again, which exists with his neshama, with his godly soul, which exists by all Yidden, that its desire and its determination by nature is to cleave in its source and in its root, which is Ein Sof Baruch Hu, which is the infinite light of Hashem. Because of this love and because of this fear, because of this love and this desire, it fears and it trembles and it has awe, this awe within its nature, min goya, to even touch, even in the very edge of the impurity of idolatry, which is against the oneness of Hashem. And to what degree, even in its external garments, which is speech or action, without any heart faith in his heart at all. Which means that this is the idea, just like when you love somebody, you fear to do against this person's will and wish and desire. So what is overwhelming is the love. You love this person, and that is what stands on the surface, but because as a result, as a derivative of your love to this person, hence you fear to do anything against what this person would like. So again, on the overall, what is the driving force behind this determination of this neshama to stand 100% aligned with HaKadosh Baruch Hu when it comes to this nisayin, when it comes to this test in emunas Hashem, is the love. Is the innate love has to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, it wants to stay with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, wants to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, wants to be one with its own source, which is the Ein Sof, which is the infinite light of Hashem, blessed be He. Consequently, and again, as a derivative of this love, as an expression or a consequent to this love, it fears to chas v'shalom touch anything which is against Hashem Echad, which is a tumah avodah zarah, the impurity of idolatry. And the lashon Alter Rebbe is biktsei avodah zarah. There's a table, and then there's the end of the table. Someone says, "Don't touch the table." Okay, this would be a violation, but this, no, maybe not. But someone who really wants to be an obedient, and if he wants to be, in other words, obedient person, if he's told not to touch the table, or he knows that this table you can get electric shock or electrified, or sorry, you could become the electric shock, for example. You touch this table, right? You get electric shock, touch the table, so you wouldn't even touch even the end of the table because it's harming. Or someone tells you not to touch, someone who you love tells you not to touch it. Or you find a connection between the person or the command, which you're commanded to, again, in this context, not to the table, with the person who commanded you to do so or not to do so. So then you're going to stay away from not only the center of the table, but even the end of the table. They could say the end of the table, in this case also. The Yid is so connected to Emunah, to Hashem Echad, to the oneness of Hashem. His Chacham bin Chacham Hashem his Emunah, his faith is so strong and is so full of energy that not only he won't touch the center of Avodah Zarah to demonstrate a heart renouncement of the oneness of Hashem, but even biktsei tumas avodah zarah, the very edge, which means to say to heart, I'm fully with you, Hashem, but even to verbally express in those few seconds, the words which would renounce the oneness of Hashem, he's also not going there. He fears even to touch that, and more so, even a step further, which is again action in the context of, in contrast to speech, which is a step further from the person. In other words, it's more more of an external expression. It's more the end of Tumas Avodah Zarah. Even there, he fears not to touch that. He's ready to expire, not to bow down for a few seconds to this idol, and literally give up his life. So this is the foundation, how the Alter Rebbe explains the Yid's connection, in other words, the Yid's demonstration of his Amunas Hashem, and he's ready, when he comes to this Nisayin, to this test of Amunas Hashem, he's ready to go all the way, and Alter Rebbe again in the end of the page, he can say to what degree he's ready to go. Now when we have this foundation, here the Alter Rebbe is going to start building in this 20th chapter. I don't think you have the 20th chapter. In the 20th chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to start building the following layer of this beautiful edifice, which again the Alter Rebbe started building in the beginning of his Ches, and it culminates and finishes in Perek Chavav, which is, again, ultimately it's connected, but ultimately it's connected, but generally it's a package over here, starting from Yud Ches till Chavav, including till Chavav, and here the Alter Rebbe continues with this beautiful, we call it beautiful edifice, this following brick, which is an important floor, important story on the message that Alter Rebbe is trying to give, which is ultimately based on this medrash, which says that ultimately every mitzvah is Anechi Hashem Elikecha, every aveira is Leilecha Lekimachem Alpanai, and therefore one has to be really careful. Look at the mitzvah, or look at the aveira as it's a violation of Avodah Zarah, and therefore be'etzem we have the kayach to overcome every single aveira and to do every single mitzvah, metech simcha, of joy and gladness of heart, with determination, and never move out of line. And again, in say mitzvah, so again, once we understand how this idea comes out so clear, when it comes to actual avodah zarah, here the Alter Rebbe will take it further to the Klolus Kol HaTorah, as it fits into the entire Torah, as Torah is divided, similar to the first Aseret, to Aseret Sedibris of Anechin Leilecha. Perek Chav, 20th chapter. It's known, right in the beginning of the 20th chapter. V'hine Mudazais. Yeah, got it? So it's known, it's known to all, the mitzvah and the warning of Avodah Zarah, Shem Shnei Dibros Harishayim, which is the first two of the commandments, that I am your God, you shall not have any other gods. This is generally the entire Torah. The entire Torah is packaged in these two aseres hadibur, two commandments. Dibur anechi, this is the Chazal tell us. The Dibur anechi, the command of anechi kol ramach mitzvah. This includes the 248 mitzvahs aseh. Leilacha kol shasam mitzvahs. That leilacha includes all the 365 mitzvahs of the negative mitzvahs. Therefore, v'lechein shamanu anechi leilacha levad mipi hagvura. Therefore, when Hashem gave the 10 commandments, it's not all the 10 commandments that we hear from Hashem. So the first 2 we heard from Hashem, and the other 8 we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu. Naturally, it was not stam given over like Moshe Rabbeinu gave over the rest of the Torah, which is also ultimately everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is with that, the tumult, right, of Har Sinai, but still you can't compare to the experience and the electrifying experience of Matan Torah was, in other words, it came across all the Aseres Hadibris, all the 10 Commandments. Yet the Gemara says that you can't compare the first 2 to the final 8, or to the other 8. The first 2 we heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvei devatzim, the Eibishter himself, and the other was from the Eibishter through Moshe Rabbeinu. So the question is, why did the Eibishter decide to say only the first 2? If he decided to be part of the Aseres Hadibris, or the Yidden should hear from him directly, from Hashem directly, says you should say all 10 commandments. If you decided to say just a few, why did you stop at the first 2? Maybe make it half and half. Why was it divided that the first 2 we heard from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the other 8 we heard from Moshe Rabbeinu? So it says that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter himself, said the first 2, because Kol HaTeira Kol HaTeira Kula. Because this encompasses the entire Torah. And therefore the Eibishter says, the first 2 you're going to hear from me. The other 8, it's going to be a Matan Torah experience. But you're going to hear it from me through Moshe Rabbeinu. But the first 2, you have to hear it from me. Because the first 2 encompasses the entire Torah. The first 2 encapsulates the entire Torah, better said. So because this is the Yisayid and Sheidish Kol HaTorah Kula, the Eibishter says, this is what you're going to hear from me. So this is the Razal tell us. So ultimately, what do we see over here? But the Alter Rebbe is going to explain with a beautiful explanation. But ultimately, what we see over here is that Razal is telling us that every single mitzvah is an every single aved is. So whatever we learned about the determination of the Yid when it comes to Avodah Zarah, ideally, conceptually, really is pertinent to every single mitzvah. And similarly, every single Aveda. If every mitzvah is Avodah Zarah, every mitzvah is Anechi Hashem Alekecha, and every Aveda is Leilachim Alkein Machim Alpanei, in essence, whatever we learned about the previous, in other words, in the previous chapter we learned that when it comes to other mitzvahs, when it comes to the Avedas, this Rosh or this Pesha Yisrael, he doesn't see the direct connection to Aveda, to something challenging his faith. So therefore he's not so scrupulous with the mitzvahs, and he's not so careful with Avedas. When it comes to the test of Avodah Zarah, there he gets up, there he wakes up and nothing stands in his way. And he goes to the farthest extreme not to renounce the oneness of Hashem. But what about the other mitzvahs? When it comes to the other mitzvahs, you say that this person is not necessarily aligned with the Ratzon Hashem, Hashem's desire, and you see he's not particularly a Frum Yid, and that's why the Alter Rebbe classifies him as a Rosh and a Pesha Yisrael. But the Alter Rebbe says that's the way it is in his mind. But be'emes lamite, truly, conceptually, every mitzvah is Anechi Hashem Alekecha. Every Aveda is Leilachim Mekil Machim Alpanei. So if you think about it ideally and conceptually, the determination of the neshama to be aligned with Ratzon Hashem when it comes to Avodah Zarah relates to every single mitzvah and every single Aveda. The problem with this person has, which we dealt with in this, which is not only this person, it could be in some level, in some subtle level, the story of all of us, is because this is part of the Ruach Shtus, is part of the spirit of folly which the Gemara deals with, which covers up over the emes. But the emes, our attitude to mitzvahs and our attitude to Avedas have to be the same way as our attitude to Avodah Zarah. Because this is what the Hazal tells us, that the reason why Hashem said, that we heard it, in other words, the Neibishter made sure that we heard it directly from him, is because the entire Torah, all mitzvahs are Neich Hashem Lekecha. And but now let's try to explain it. The Alter Rebbe says this is the way it is, but let's try to explain it. Once we understand it thoroughly, we'll be able to live with this. Hence, we'll be able to set ourselves up in a way that we will demonstrate the same determination when it comes to doing a mitzvah, and the same determination of preventing ourselves chas v'shalom from doing chas v'shalom and aveda, the same approach that we have to aveda zarah. So levayir heitivin yizeh, to understand this thoroughly. So Alter Rebbe gives an introduction, and in other words, it's a longer introduction. With after the introduction, the culminating point will demonstrate this notion so clearly and vividly. So what is it? To understand this, we have to explain initially, in brief, when we speak about the oneness of Hashem, what is it when we say Hashem Echad? That He's called complete, He's one. And the same way, He is now, just like before He created the world. In other words, when we put our hands over our eyes and we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God, Hashem is one. What are we saying? When we say Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, what are we actually saying? We're not saying that there is only one Hashem. What are we negating? There's no two Hashem. Even if you think about it, Chas v'Shalom, obviously there's only one God. But is this our proclamation? Is this our formal demonstration when we stand in shul or we stand in any other place and we say Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, just denying that there's no two gods? And what does it say to us if there's no two gods? If there's a superpower which wants me to conduct myself in a certain way, so what if there's two? Obviously it's nonsense to say there's two. But this is namely what we're saying over here. This is not what we're negating. To say there's no two gods or three gods. That's not what we have to stand and proclaim Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Ideally, if you think, who cares? So there's two. Again, I'm just saying this, in just for argument's sake. Chas v'Shalom, Chachman al to say there's more than one God. Obviously, Hashem Echad is. In the end of the day, they ain't sheni lay. There's only one God. But if you think about it, this is not the message which we demonstrate to ourselves and to the society around us. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Doesn't seem like, just to negate that there's no two gods, doesn't seem that that's the energy which stands behind the proclamation of Hashem Echad. And it truly is so. That's not what we're negating, that there's no two or three gods. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad means, what we're saying is that there isn't anything else other than God. That's the Hashem Echad. And that's a total different message. It's not that there is a God and that there is everything else I see around me. Hashem Echad means that this is a part of God and that is a part of God. Like the Gemara says about Hashem Echad, the Gemara says the Echad is a combination of three letters. Aleph and Ches Dalet. And the Gemara says that's the message of Hashem Echad. You see Ches and Dalet. Ches is the seven heavens. Zayin, Rekim, and Oretz. And you see the Dalet, which is the four corners of the world. You should know, you know what that is. That's part of the Aleph. And there's obviously different levels in Hashem Echad. Ultimately, not only, and again, saying that Hashem is in charge of the seven heavens and earth, which you see, which is again also a demonstration of the dominion of Hashem over everything, but more than that. Hashem Echad means to say the texture, the makeup of the seven Rikim and Aretz. This is Elokus, this is God. And the Daled, you see the four Ruchas HaOlam, the four sides, this is God. That is the proclamation of Hashem Echad. Hashem Echad means that everything is part of the oneness of Hashem. Not that there's God and there's something else, or like we say, maybe even He's in charge of that. But that is that is something that has its own entity. No, Hashem Echad means that everything is part of God. So God is everything and everything is God. That is what we protest. That's what we proclaim when we say Hashem Echad. So Be'ez Hashem will continue this coming week explaining this clearer, and why this has to do with what we say in the morning. Atu mishenivra elam, atu mishalei nivra elam. That we say, Hashem, you were there before you created the world, and you were there after you created the world. What is this? And what does this mean? Is it we get up in the morning, one of the primary prayers of the Yid, to say, you were there before you created the world, and you were there after you created the world. Okay, where did I go? Where do you think I went? I went for lunch. I went to drink something. Obviously, I'm here. No, but there's an important message over here, which ultimately, as we're going to explain by Hashem this coming week, how essentially Hashem is saying that when I created the world, there's no two entities. Just like before I created the world, there was only God. Even after He created the world, there's still only God. This is just another way Hashem expressed Himself. Before it was without a world, now it's with a world, but nothing has changed. That's the message of Hashem Echad, because everything, the Ches, the Dalet, which it appears on the surface as another entity. There's a Ches and there's Dalet, there's 7 heavens and earth, which didn't exist before Hashem created the world. There's 4 sides of the world, which didn't exist before Hashem created the world. There's no world, so there's no sides to the world. But we still say, no, this is the Aleph. Everything of the Ches and the Dalet is an expression or is part of the Aleph, the Hashem. And that is the proclamation of Hashem Echad. But again, it goes even further. That not only Hashem is in charge, but everything is part of it. As in the world is Hashem. I mean, everything is Hashem, and Hashem is everything. So just wanted to conclude an interesting verb, because it's related to the last week's parsha. This is the way Avraham Avinu demonstrated, and again in his divine service, the Hashem Echad, the oneness of Hashem. In other words, in his educating the world of monotheism as opposed to paganism, right? The oneness of Hashem. So the pasuk says in a very unique. The pasuk expresses itself very uniquely, in a very unique way, clarifying or demonstrating with precision the way Avram's message was laid out, was expressed. It says, the pasuk says, "Vayikra sham b'shem Hashem Keil Olam," that he called to the people around him, Keil Olam, God world. If you really want to translate it literally, because usually we know it's Keil Ha'olam. We would say God of the world. Apparently this would be the message. That Avraham Avinu called to the people around him, and he focused on God as God being the God of the world. Keil Ha'olam. But in reality, it doesn't say Keil Ha'olam. It says Keil Olam. God, world. Not God of the world. What's the difference? The difference is enormous. Because when you say the word Keil Ha'olam, that He's a God of the world or over the world, which connotes that He's in charge of the world. He's even when you say He's in charge of every detail of the world, but ultimately what you're saying is there's a world, a independent entity, or an entity. Let's not say independent, but an entity. It's Olam. Then there's a Keil, there's a God. And this God is Keil Ha'olam. He's a God over the Olam, over the world. But that itself says that the world is an entity on its own. Completely dominated by God, yes. No one else is in charge, true. And He's in charge of every detail and every precise detail and nuance, everything that goes on. Also true, Maskim. Because Keil Ha'olam says that. Because if He's God of every part of the Olam, every part and parcel of the Olam, every detail of the Olam, fine. But that itself is demonstrating, that statement itself demonstrates that there is an Olam, there's a world. And He's Keil over the Olam. The pasuk is telling us more so in Avram's message, which is much deeper than that. Not that there's a world and God is in charge of the world, but the pasuk says Keil Olam, that the makeup of the Olam itself is God. So there's no two entities, one is in charge over the other. Keil Olam means if you see an Olam, you should know it's Keil. It doesn't have any independence. It doesn't have nothing of its truly of its own, no independent entity, because everything of the Olam is Keil, is God. And that's ultimately the message of Hashem Echad. That not that there's a God and there's a world and Hashem is in charge and so on. Hashem Echad says that the world itself, the mere makeup of the world, is the godly energy. And now we can understand what does mean Hashem before the creator of the world, after the creator. It's not that that He didn't go anywhere. It means that nothing has changed. It's the same God, just like before Hashem created the world, there was only one entity. after Hashem created the world, there's still one entity, which is ultimately God, the way God expresses himself and invests himself in Ches, in a Dalit, and so on. But ultimately, Ata Achlini V'Reilam, before you created, it's the same Ata, it's the same you, and then Ata Achlini V'Reilam, it's the same God. There's no two entities. Have a good night.